In a towering skyscraper in New York City called Donovan Tower, Ronan Donovan sat in his big fancy office on the 40th floor. Ronan was the son of a very rich and powerful family, and someday he would take over the family business. But today, he was in trouble. He stared at his laptop screen, his eyebrows furrowed, and his dark hair, always perfectly combed, was now slightly messy from him running his fingers through it over and over again. The screen showed a news headline, big and bold: Ronan Donovan accused in financial scandal. It was everywhere, on TV, online, even on people's phones. The story wasn't true, but people were talking about it like it was. If they believed it, it could ruin not just Ronan, but his family's company, which had been around for 3 generations. "This is ridiculous," Ronan shouted, his voice echoing in the room. He slammed his laptop shut and leaned back in his chair, frustrated. Victoria Chen, the company's public relations director, stood at the end of the long, shiny mahogany table. She was a smart woman who always stayed calm, but even she looked worried today. "Mr. Donovan, the problem isn't whether the accusations are true or false," she said carefully. "The problem is what people believe. Right now, the media is painting you as the bad guy. We need to change the story. We need something big, something that makes people stop talking about this scandal." As Victoria spoke, the glass door to the office opened and Sophia Ramirez walked in. Sophia was Ronan's assistant, and she'd been working for him for 2 years. She was quiet and very professional. Everyone on the floor liked her because she was kind and hardworking. She carried a tray of coffee and placed it on the table without making a sound. Sophia always knew when to stay invisible, especially during important meetings like this one. But as she turned to leave, Ronan's eyes followed her. Suddenly, an idea popped into his head. "Victoria," he said, sitting up straighter, "you said we need to change the story, right?" Victoria nodded. "Exactly. Something big. What if—" Ronan hesitated, glancing at Sophia, who was now reaching for the door handle. "What if I announced my engagement?" The room fell silent. Sophia froze in her tracks, her hands still on the door. Victoria raised an eyebrow, curious. "Go on," she said. Ronan stood up, his voice growing more confident as he explained. "Think about it. A rich businessman falls in love with his assistant. It's the perfect story. The media would eat it up. A modern fairy tale. It'll make everyone forget about this scandal." Sophia turned around slowly, her eyes wide with shock. "Excuse me?" she said. Victoria's eyes lit up. "That's brilliant, a love story breaking down social barriers. It's exactly the kind of distraction we need." She started typing furiously on her tablet. But Sophia was not happy. "You can't just decide that without asking me," she protested, her voice sharper than usual. Ronan looked at her, his blue eyes steady. "I'll pay you double your salary," he said. "Plus a big bonus when it's all over. It'll only be for a few months, just until this scandal dies down." Sophia's mind raced. Her family needed money. Her younger sister was sick and needed an expensive surgery. Her mother was still paying off debts from her father's death. They were struggling, and this kind of money could solve so many problems. But could she really agree to something like this? "Why me?" she asked quietly, her voice barely a whisper. Ronan took a step closer, trying to choose his words carefully. "Because you're smart, professional, and believable," he said. "People will believe that someone like me could fall in love with someone like you." Sophia blinked, the words stinging even though she knew he didn't mean to insult her. "Someone like me?" she repeated, her voice tinged with hurt. Victoria quickly stepped in to smooth things over. "Think of it like a business deal, Sophia," she said. "You both get what you need. It's a win-win." Sophia looked out the giant window at the busy city below. New York was a place of big dreams and tough choices. Her family had moved there from Mexico, hoping for a better life. And now, here she was, at the top of a skyscraper, being asked to lie to the world for money. After a long pause, she nodded slowly. "Fine," she said, surprising even herself, "but I have rules." "Of course," Ronan said. "What are they?" This stays strictly professional, Sophia said firmly. No funny business, no taking advantage of the situation. And when this is over, you'll write me a good recommendation letter and never interfere with my career. Ronan looked a little taken aback by her boldness, but he nodded. Deal, he said, holding out his hand. Sophia hesitated, then shook his hand. As their hands touched, an unexpected spark of electricity seemed to pass between them. Neither of them said anything about it, but both felt it. Victoria clapped her hands, already back in business mode. Great. I'll start drafting the press release. We need a believable story about how you two fell in love. Something gradual, something realistic. The very next day, the news spread like wildfire. Every headline was about the surprise engagement of Ronan Donovan and his assistant, Sophia Ramirez. Photos of them together popped up everywhere. In one picture, Ronan was holding the door open for Sophia, a moment that had seemed normal at the time but now looked romantic. Sophia stared at her phone in disbelief as she waited for the elevator in the lobby of Donovan Tower. Her own face was on the screen, right next to Ronan's. She couldn't believe this was really happening. Miss Martinez, or should I say future Mrs. Donovan, called a cheerful voice. Sophia looked up to see Nick, the building's doorman. Nick had worked there for years and was always kind to her. His eyes sparkled with happiness. Nick, Sophia began, but he cut her off. I knew it, he said, beaming. The way Mr. Donovan looks at you, anyone could see it. Sophia felt a knot of guilt in her stomach, but didn't have to respond. The elevator arrived just in time. She stepped inside, avoiding Nick's kind gaze, and pressed the button for the 40th floor. As the elevator climbed, she stared at her reflection in the mirrored walls. She was wearing the same plain gray suit she always wore, her black hair tied up neatly. She didn't look like someone who was engaged to a billionaire. When the doors opened, Victoria was waiting for her. We have a lot to do, Victoria said, pulling her into a meeting room. A lot to do? Sophia asked, confused. You can't keep dressing like an ordinary assistant, Victoria explained. You're the fiancée of a billionaire now. We need to upgrade your image. Victoria handed her a long list of events, interviews, and photo shoots. But the part that made Sophia gasp was when Victoria said, You'll also need to move in with Ronan. What? Sophia almost dropped her coffee. That was not part of the deal. It's necessary, Victoria said. If you live apart, people will suspect the engagement is fake. Before Sophia could argue, the door opened and Ronan walked in. He was wearing a casual navy blue shirt, looking calm and confident. How's my fiancée today? He joked with a smile. Sophia glared at him. Apparently, I'm being evicted from my own apartment. Ronan's smile faded. Sophia, I know this is a lot, but we have to make it convincing. My family has enemies who would love to catch us lying. For the first time, Sophia saw a hint of vulnerability in him. She sighed. Fine, but my rules still stand. Ronan nodded. Deal. Victoria clapped her hands again. Now about the ring. Ronan reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Inside was a stunning diamond ring, surrounded by tiny blue sapphires. It was my grandmother's ring, Maxwell said, his voice softer. I thought wearing a family jewel would make it seem more real. Sophia's hands shook a little as he slid the ring onto her finger. The metal felt cold, but his fingers were warm. Perfect, Victoria said, smiling. Now, let's work on the story of how you fell in love. For the next few hours, they worked together to create a believable love story. Little, real moments were turned into something special, like the time Sophia stayed late to help Maxwell with a big presentation. That became the moment he realized he had feelings for her. Or when they shared a cab during a storm, that became their first real connection. The closer you stay to the truth, the easier it is to keep the story going, Victoria explained. By the end of the day, Sophia felt like her life had turned into a pretend fairy tale. Her small apartment in Queens, her late nights studying for her business degree, and her worries about her family's bills all seemed so far away now. A car will come at 7 to take you to the penthouse, Maxwell told her when the meeting ended. Sophia nodded, unsure of what to say. Just as she was leaving, Maxwell called her name again. This time, his voice sounded different, softer. "Thank you for doing this," he said. "I know it's a lot to ask." She turned to look at him, surprised by the honesty in his blue eyes. "I'm not doing this for you, Mr. Donovan," she said firmly. "I'm doing it for the money." "I know," he said with a sad smile, "and that's why you're perfect for this. You're real, Sophia. In a world where everyone pretends to be someone else, you're just you." His words stayed in her mind for the rest of the day. As she packed her belongings, said goodbye to her kind old neighbor, and took one last look at the apartment she had called home for 5 years, she felt the weight of what was happening. At exactly 7, a shiny black car pulled up to take her to Maxwell's penthouse. As the driver loaded her bags into the trunk, Sophia looked down at the sparkling sapphire ring on her finger. It was beautiful and valuable, too special to just be part of a lie. But that's what it was. A lie. She had to remind herself of that, or she might forget. Maxwell's penthouse on the Upper East Side was just like she had imagined. Huge, fancy, and cold. It took up the top 2 floors of a tall, old building with amazing views of Central Park. Everything about it was expensive, from the shiny marble floors to the fancy art on the walls. "Your room is upstairs," Maxwell said as they climbed a glass staircase. "I thought you'd want your own space." Sophia followed him, carrying a small suitcase. Most of her things would arrive the next day. The room was as big as her entire apartment, with a giant bed and a private balcony. The closet, which was as large as her old kitchen, was completely empty, waiting to be filled. "The bathroom is connected," Maxwell added, pointing to a door. "And there's a small office in case you need a quiet place to study." She turned to him, surprised. "How do you know I study?" "I see you reading business books during lunch breaks," he said with a shrug, "and I've noticed you taking notes between meetings." Sophia didn't know how to feel about this. "Thanks," she muttered. "I'll let you settle in," Maxwell said, heading to the door. "Oh, and Victoria set up a breakfast with the press tomorrow morning at 9 at Le Bernardin." Before she could respond, he was gone. Feeling overwhelmed, Sophia explored her new space. The bathroom was stocked with expensive soaps and creams, probably from Victoria. The closet already had fancy pajamas and silk robes. Her phone buzzed with a message from her younger sister, Lily Rivera. "I saw you on the news. Why didn't you tell me about Maxwell?" Sophia's stomach felt heavy with guilt. She had told her family only part of the truth, that she was dating her boss and things had moved fast. It was easier than explaining the real story. "It happened really quickly," she typed back, feeling terrible. "I'll explain more soon." Needing to relax, Sophia took a shower. The warm water helped for a moment, but then she heard voices downstairs. "You can't be serious, Maxwell," said a woman, her voice sharp and fancy. Curious, Sophia turned off the shower and listened. "Mom, not now," Maxwell said, sounding tense. "Not now? When will it be the right time to talk about you ruining the family name? A maid, Maxwell. Your grandmother would be ashamed to see that ring on her finger." "Don't finish that sentence," Maxwell interrupted firmly. "Sophia is smart, capable, and more dignified than many of the rich women you admire." Silence followed. Sophia's heart raced. She felt torn, angry about how the woman saw her, but also shocked by how strongly Maxwell defended her. "You've always been stubborn," his mother said finally, calmer now. "But this is beyond stubborn. It's reckless." "It's my life," Maxwell replied, "and my choice. If you can't respect that, maybe we should spend some time apart." Sophia heard high heels clicking on the marble floor, followed by the sound of the door closing. After waiting a moment, she got dressed and went downstairs. Maxwell was sitting on the couch holding a glass of whiskey. "Your mom seems nice," Sophia said dryly, standing at the bottom of the stairs. Maxwell looked up at her, a tired smile on his face. "You heard?" "Hard not to," she replied. I think the whole neighborhood heard. Maxwell motioned for her to sit next to him. After a moment, she did. I'm sorry about that, he said. My mom has strong opinions. She doesn't want me marrying someone like you. Sophia raised an eyebrow. Someone like me? Someone working class. Someone normal, Maxwell said, swirling his drink. She wants everything to look perfect, but I'm tired of pretending to be someone I'm not. Sophia looked at him differently now, seeing a side of him she hadn't before. Well, she said softly, at least choosing me was your decision, even if it was for the wrong reasons. Maxwell laughed. True, and for once I don't care what my mom thinks. Their eyes met, and for a moment something unspoken passed between them. Sophia quickly looked away. We should prepare for tomorrow, she said, switching back to business mode. Right, Maxwell said, setting his glass down. As they went over the script for their fake romance, Sophia couldn't stop thinking about how Maxwell had stood up for her. Maybe, just maybe, there was more to him than she thought. The next morning, they arrived at the fancy restaurant Le Bernardin. The room was beautiful, with elegant decorations. Sophia wore a navy blue dress Victoria had picked out, feeling like an actress about to perform. Remember, Victoria whispered, you're a couple who kept your love secret for work reasons, but now you're ready to share it with the world. Sophia nodded nervously. The sapphire ring on her finger felt heavier than ever. Reporters were waiting at their table, eager for the story. Mr. Donovan, Miss Martinez, a reporter from the New York Times, began, How did this love story begin? Maxwell smiled and placed his hand over Sophia's on the table. The gesture felt warm, sending a strange shiver through her. Well, he said, looking at Sophia like she was the most important person in the world, it all started. Sophia had never met someone like Maxwell before. Spending so much time with him, watching how hardworking, smart, and kind he was, it was hard not to admire him. Her heart beat faster as he spoke and looked at her. If she didn't know better, she might have thought he really cared. Then a journalist asked, Miss Martinez, people are curious about the difference in social classes between you and Maxwell. How do you handle that? Before Victoria, their manager, could reply, Sophia spoke up. Social class doesn't decide who you are. I watched my mom work 3 jobs to help us get an education. I learned that respect is earned by what you do, not by your family name. The room went quiet as everyone admired her answer. Maxwell shook her hand and whispered, Well done. Another reporter asked, What are your plans for the future? Sophia said honestly, to finish my business degree. Maxwell has been very supportive. That's true, Maxwell said with a smile. Sophia is very talented. I'm sure she'll run her own company one day. The rest of the breakfast was filled with more questions, and Sophia answered carefully. By the end, she was exhausted. You were amazing, Victoria said as they left. That part about social class? Gold. But Sophia wasn't listening. Her mind was stuck on the way Maxwell had looked at her, how warm his hand felt, and how real his words sounded. In the car, Maxwell broke the silence. Was what you said about your mom true? Sophia looked out the window. Yes, she worked as a cleaner, a waitress, and a caregiver. She still works hard. And your dad? He asked. He died when I was 16. He left us with more debts than memories. Maxwell was quiet for a moment, then asked, Is that why you agreed to this deal? Partly, Sophia admitted. My little sister needs surgery and we can't afford it. You should have told me. The company's health plan could help, Maxwell said, sounding concerned. Sophia turned to him surprised. I didn't want it to look like I was asking for favors. Everything I've done, I earned on my own. Your pride is both your best quality and your biggest weakness, Maxwell said with a soft smile. Look who's talking, Sophia teased. The guy who'd rather fake an engagement than admit a mistake. Maxwell's smile faded. Touché. When they reached the office, Victoria greeted them with a long list of tasks. Photo shoots, interviews, charity events, and a fancy gala dinner next weekend. All of New York's high society will be there, Victoria said, including your mother. Don't worry about her, Maxwell said firmly. She'll have to accept my choices, real or not. Those words, real or not, stung Sophia. For a few hours that morning, she had almost believed their act was real. But it wasn't. Everything Maxwell said or did was part of a performance. Yet, as she watched him later through the glass wall of his office, she wondered if maybe, just maybe, some of it wasn't pretend. It was a dangerous thought. The night of the gala, Sophia stood in front of the mirror, adjusting her fancy red dress. She barely recognized herself with her elegant hair and makeup. You look stunning, Victoria said, walking in. But stop fussing with the dress. Confidence is key. Easy for you to say, Sophia muttered. You're not pretending to be something you're not. Victoria smiled. Oh, honey, we're all pretending. The trick is doing it so well you forget it's an act. That struck a chord with Sophia. Had she been pretending too, ever since she started working at Donovan Tower? Maxwell is waiting, Victoria reminded her. You're the couple of the evening. Everyone will be watching. In the lobby, Maxwell stood in a sharp tuxedo. When he saw her, his jaw dropped. You look, he began, but stopped, as if he couldn't find the words. Good enough not to embarrass you? She teased. Extraordinary, he said seriously, offering his arm. When they entered the grand ballroom, Sophia felt the stares and heard the whispers. Across the room, Maxwell's mother, Victoria, looked disapproving. An elegant woman approached them. Maxwell, darling, she said, and this must be your fiancée. I'm Camilla Hamilton. Delighted, Sophia said politely. I loved your interview, Camilla continued. So refreshing. Before Sophia could reply, another voice cut in. Refreshing is an interesting word, said Victoria Donovan. Her tone was cold. I would have said inappropriate. Sophia felt Maxwell tense beside her, but she stepped forward. Mrs. Donovan, she said calmly, it's inappropriate to judge people by their wealth or family name. It's also wrong not to see how amazing your son is. He deserves to be loved for who he is, not what he has. Victoria looked shocked and quickly walked away. Camilla raised her glass. Bravo, she whispered before leaving them alone. Maxwell led Sophia to the dance floor as soft music played. You didn't have to defend me, he said quietly. I wasn't defending you, she replied. I was telling the truth. What truth? He asked. That you're more than your last name or your bank account. Sophia had been watching Maxwell closely. Over the past few weeks, she had seen a man who worked so hard, who cared about his employees, and who tried to do the right thing even when others had high expectations of him. Maxwell stepped closer to her until they were standing very near. And what else do you see? He asked. I see someone who deserves to be loved for who they really are, not for what they seem to be, she said softly. The moment between them felt heavier than the lights, the music, or even the warmth of his hand on her back. Everything felt so real, but it wasn't supposed to be. Sophia, Maxwell began, his voice full of emotion. No, she interrupted him. Please don't say anything. This isn't real, remember? But when their eyes met, they both knew they had gone far past pretending. It was impossible to tell what was real and what was fake anymore. That night felt like a dream. Sophia danced, smiled, and played her part perfectly, but inside, her heart was battling. She couldn't deny the feelings that were growing. When they got back to the penthouse late at night, they didn't speak. Good night, Maxwell, she murmured, quickly heading to the stairs. Sophia, he called, stopping her on the first step. What you said today about me deserving love, was it part of the act? She froze. Without turning around, she lied. It was just part of the show. But as she walked up the stairs, tears rolled down her cheeks because, for the first time, she realized she was truly falling in love with him, the man she was only pretending to love. The next morning, Sophia felt tense. She avoided breakfast and decided to take a walk in Central Park instead. The cool fall air helped her think. Her phone buzzed. It was her sister, Lily Rivera. I saw the photos from last night, Lily Rivera said in a message. You and Maxwell look like a couple from a movie. Sophia put her phone away, feeling guilty. How could she explain to her sister that those perfect photos were based on feelings she shouldn't have? When she got to the office, Victoria, the PR director, was waiting for her with a worried look. Page 6 is investigating your past, Victoria said. They're suspicious about how quickly you two got engaged. Sophia's stomach dropped. What have they found? Nothing yet, Victoria said, but we need to make your story stronger. There's a big charity event this weekend. It's the perfect time to show everyone how in love you two are. What do you mean? Sophia asked. A kiss in public, Victoria said. Photos of that would prove your relationship is real. Sophia froze. I can't do that, she said, standing up. Victoria softened her voice. Sophia, I've seen the way you and Maxwell look at each other. Are you sure this isn't real? It's not real, Sophia insisted, mostly to herself. But before she could say more, Maxwell walked into the room. He looked at her for a moment before turning away. Victoria, can we have a minute? He asked. When they were alone, Maxwell spoke. I heard about the kiss idea. We don't have to do it, Sophia said quickly. We'll find another way. What if I want to? He asked. Sophia stared at him, surprised. Last night, Maxwell said, stepping closer, when you talked about me deserving to be loved for who I am, it was the first time anyone has ever seen me like that. Not as the Donovan heir, but as just me. Please stop, Sophia whispered, tears in her eyes. We can't do this. This is a business deal, remember? Is it? Maxwell asked. Because for me, it hasn't felt like that for a long time. Sophia tried to keep her distance, but Maxwell continued. Every morning, my first thought is you. During meetings, I think about your smile. When something funny happens, I want to share it with you. Tell me you don't feel the same way. Sophia shook her head. You're confusing gratitude with something else. I helped you, and that's all. It's not gratitude, Maxwell said. It's much deeper than that, and you know it. Sophia tried to hold back tears. I can't do this. We're from different worlds. When this is over, you'll go back to your life, and I'll go back to mine. What are you afraid of? Maxwell asked gently. That it's too real, she admitted. That I won't be able to forget you. Maxwell stepped closer, his voice soft. What if it didn't have to end? Sophia's heart raced. I have to go, she said, leaving the room. Saturday night came, and Sophia stood in a car outside the Metropolitan Museum, dressed in a flowing sapphire blue gown. She looked stunning, but she didn't feel ready. Are you ready? Maxwell asked as the car stopped. No, she said honestly, but let's do it anyway. The cameras flashed as soon as they stepped onto the red carpet. Maxwell rested his hand lightly on Sophia's back. Miss Martinez, how does it feel to be Cinderella? One reporter called. Inside, the museum's Egyptian wing was transformed into a glamorous party. Maxwell leaned closer to Sophia. Fascinating, isn't it? He said. We're celebrating here, surrounded by ancient history. You know Egyptian history? Sophia asked, surprised. It was my secret passion in college, Maxwell said, with a boyish smile. I even wanted to study archaeology. Little moments like this, getting to know the real Maxwell, scared Sophia. It was easy to guard her heart against the businessman, but this side of him was dangerous. She couldn't help but feel drawn to him. Later, Victoria appeared at their table. Page 6 is here, she whispered. It's time. Sophia felt nervous, but she knew it had to happen. Let's dance, she said, standing up. On the dance floor, Maxwell held her close. Sophia, he said softly, if we're going to do this, I want it to be real. How can it be real when it started with a lie? She asked. Sometimes the best truths come from necessary lies, he said. The music swirled around them. I'm scared, she admitted. Of what? That this is too real, she said. That when it's over, it will hurt too much. What if it doesn't have to end? Maxwell asked, stopping their dance. He framed her face with his hands, looking deep into her eyes. What if this is just the beginning? When their lips met, the world seemed to freeze. The kiss wasn't for the cameras or anyone else. It was real, and they both knew it. When they pulled apart, everything had changed. The lie they had started with didn't matter anymore. Miss Martinez, someone called, breaking the moment. But it was too late. Sophia and Maxwell had already crossed the line into something real. Sophia stood in the middle of the fancy museum event, feeling like everything was perfect. But then a man from the newspaper page 6 came up to her and Maxwell. His smile wasn't friendly. It was sneaky, like he knew something bad. "What a coincidence," he said. "Your love story started the same day as the Donovan financial scandal. Care to explain that perfect timing?" Sophia's heart dropped. Just a moment ago, everything felt magical. Now it was broken like glass hitting the floor. Before she could say anything, Victoria, Maxwell's assistant, appeared. "No comment," Victoria said quickly, trying to stop things from getting worse. But it was too late. The reporter had what he wanted. Sophia could see it in his eyes. He was about to tell everyone their secret. The life she and Maxwell had built was like a house of cards, ready to fall. Sophia let go of Maxwell's hand and did the only thing she could think of. She ran. Her heels clicked loudly as she hurried through the museum, leaving behind the man she truly loved. She jumped into a taxi outside. "Where to, ma'am?" the driver asked. Sophia didn't know where to go. She couldn't go back to Maxwell's fancy penthouse apartment, and her old place already had new renters. Finally, she said, "The Plaza Hotel." As the cab drove through Manhattan, Sophia stared out the window, holding back tears. Her phone buzzed over and over, messages from friends, calls from Victoria, and notifications from social media. Everyone was talking about what happened at the museum. One message stood out. It was from Maxwell. "Sophia, please let me explain. What started as a lie became real. I love you." Sophia's tears fell freely now. How could Maxwell say he loved her when their whole relationship was built on lies? A soft knock on the hotel door startled her. "Room service," a woman's voice said. "I didn't order anything," Sophia called back. "Actually, dear, you need to open the door," the voice replied. Sophia recognized the voice. It was Camilla Hamilton, a kind woman she had met at another fancy event. "How did you find me?" Sophia asked as Camilla walked in without waiting for an invitation. "I know all the hotels in this city," Camilla said with a smile. She held up a bottle of champagne and 2 glasses. "Now, let's talk about love, lies, and everything in between." "There's nothing to talk about," Sophia said sadly. "It was all fake from the start." "Was it?" Camilla asked, raising an eyebrow as she poured champagne. "I've seen plenty of fake relationships in this city, but you and Maxwell? You're different." "How can you be so sure?" Sophia asked. "Because fake relationships don't make people cry real tears," Camilla said gently. Sophia touched her wet face without realizing it. "But how can I trust something that started with a lie?" "Oh, darling," Camilla said, laughing softly. "Love doesn't always make sense. Sometimes the best love stories start in the strangest ways." Another knock interrupted them. It was Victoria, looking tired but determined. "Sophia, we need to talk about damage control," she said, but Camilla waved her in. "Come in, Victoria, sit down and have some champagne. We all need a moment." The 3 women sat together, an unlikely group, a wealthy socialite, a PR expert, and a woman who just ran away from her engagement. "Page 6 will publish the story tomorrow," Victoria said after taking a sip. "But maybe we can use that to our advantage." "How?" Sophia asked. "By telling the truth," Victoria said. "Not all of it, but enough. Yes, the engagement started as a plan to fix Maxwell's reputation, but the feelings that came later, those are real." "What about the company? The shareholders?" Sophia asked. "Sometimes," Camilla said, "the best way to protect a reputation is to show you're human. People love a redemption story, especially one with true love." Before Sophia could answer, her phone buzzed again. It was her sister, Lily Rivera. "Sis, Maxwell's on TV right now," Lily Rivera said. "He's giving a press conference and declaring his love for you." Sophia grabbed the remote and turned on the TV. There was Maxwell, looking different. His tie was loose, his hair messy, and his face vulnerable. Vulnerable. Yes, our engagement started as a strategy, Maxwell said to the cameras. But falling in love with Sophia was the most unplanned and wonderful thing in my life. Victoria and Camilla watched Sophia closely. What are you going to do now? Camilla asked. Sophia looked at the sapphire ring on her finger, at the two women supporting her, and at Maxwell on the screen. She had changed so much since this all began. She wasn't the same person who had agreed to the engagement deal. I have to go, she said suddenly, standing up. Where? Victoria asked, already smiling like she knew the answer. To tell my own truth. The city was alive as Sophia left the hotel. She got into another cab, her blue dress flowing as she moved. Turn on the news, please, she asked the driver. The radio announced, the Donovan financial scandal has been proven false. All evidence shows it was a setup. Maxwell Donovan knew weeks ago. Sophia's phone buzzed again. It was Lily Rivera. Maxwell knew about the scandal being fake for weeks, but he didn't end the engagement. Why? The cab stopped in front of Donovan Tower. Sophia stepped inside, and the doorman smiled. He's upstairs on the roof, he said. The elevator took Sophia to the top floor where a beautiful garden waited. Maxwell was standing there, looking out at the city. When he heard her footsteps, he turned. You knew, Sophia said. I knew the scandal was fake, Maxwell admitted. Our lawyers found the truth weeks ago. Why didn't you tell me? Why keep pretending? Because by then, it wasn't pretend for me anymore, Maxwell said. I was scared that if I told you the truth, you'd leave. Sophia's voice shook. So you kept lying? No, Maxwell said, stepping closer. I kept hoping that what we had was strong enough to survive the truth. Sophia, I've spent my whole life following rules, but with you, I finally felt free to be myself. Who are you, really? She asked softly. I'm a man who loves you, Maxwell said. And I'd risk everything, my company, my reputation, for you. Sophia didn't know what to say. She watched as Maxwell knelt down, pulling out a small ring box. Sophia Ramirez, he said, opening the box to show a simple, beautiful ring. Will you marry me? Not for a deal, but because I love you. Sophia looked at the sapphire ring on her hand, the one that symbolized the lie their relationship began with. Slowly, she took it off and placed it in Maxwell's hand. Maxwell's face fell, but before he could get up, she held out her left hand. Yes, she said firmly. Yes, I'll marry you. Not the Donovan heir, but the man who had the courage to tell the truth. A soft, golden light spread over Manhattan as Sophia stood on the balcony, watching the city wake up. She looked at her shiny new ring, which wasn't just fancy jewelry anymore. It was a promise of real love. The night before had changed everything. Maxwell had told her the truth about a big misunderstanding, cleared up a scandal, and then asked her to marry him. It all felt like a dream, but it also felt right, like it was meant to happen. Coffee? Maxwell's voice made her turn. He was standing there with a steaming cup in his hand. He looked ready for work, but there was something different about him. He seemed lighter, happier. Thanks, Sophia said, taking the cup. She smiled. It's funny, isn't it? How everything has changed, but also stayed the same. What do you mean? He asked, leaning on the railing next to her. Well, you're still the boss at Donovan Enterprises. I'm still your assistant. Manhattan is still rushing around down there, but nothing feels the same anymore. Maxwell smiled a little. Actually, about that, there's something we need to talk about. Sophia's heart beat faster. What is it? Last night, after the press conference, the board made a suggestion. They want to create a new part of the company to help people, like working on community projects and doing good things for others. And guess what? They want you to be in charge of it. Sophia almost dropped her coffee. Me? But I haven't even finished college yet. That's why it's perfect, Maxwell said. You can finish your studies while building this project. You understand what people need. That's exactly what we're looking for. But people will think it's favoritism, Like you're giving me this job just because we're together, she said. Maxwell shook his head. Not at all. It wasn't even my idea. The board decided this because they were impressed by how passionate you were about helping people. They saw you on TV and thought, she's the one. Just then, Sophia's phone buzzed. It was a message from her sister, Lily Rivera. I just saw the news. They're naming a scholarship after you. Why didn't you tell me? Sophia looked at Maxwell, confused. A scholarship program? Maxwell smiled, a little shy. Surprise. I thought it would be a good way to start your new division, helping students like you who have big dreams but need a little support. Tears filled Sophia's eyes, not sad tears, but happy ones. How do you always do this? She asked softly. Do what? Turn every lie into something good and true. Maxwell touched her face gently. Because you showed me what truth really means. It's not just about avoiding lies. It's about being real. Just then, Victoria, Maxwell's assistant, appeared, holding her tablet like always. Sorry to interrupt, lovebirds, but we've got a busy day ahead. Sophia laughed. Victoria, do we still need a PR person now that the truth is out? More than ever, Victoria replied with a grin. Someone has to handle all the good press about the couple who turned a business deal into true love. The rest of the day flew by with meetings and interviews. This time, everything felt different. They weren't covering up lies anymore. They were building something real. Later in the afternoon, Sophia found a moment to visit Nick, the doorman. Well, Nick said with a knowing smile. I guess I can officially say I knew it. Knew what? Sophia asked, curious. Nick chuckled. I've worked here for 30 years, watching people come and go. I can always tell when something is real, even before the people involved know it themselves. Touched, Sophia gave Nick a big hug, making him laugh. That evening, back in the garden, Sophia found Maxwell standing where they had shared so many important moments. A penny for your thoughts? He asked, smiling as she came closer. I was just thinking about how funny life is, she said, holding his hand. How so? We started this whole thing with a lie to protect your reputation, but it ended up leading us to the truth, and it saved us both. What do you mean? Well, you let go of all the masks and expectations that were weighing you down, and I learned that sometimes you have to lose a little of yourself to truly find who you are. Maxwell pulled her into a hug. You know what else is funny? When I came up with that fake engagement plan, I thought I was protecting the Donovan name, but I didn't realize I was creating something much more important. What's that? Sophia asked. A legacy of love, Maxwell said, smiling. It proves that even the craziest, most unlikely stories can lead to something real. Sometimes the best things start with a lie but end with the purest truth. The sun was setting, painting the sky with pink and gold. The city below kept moving, unaware of the miracle that had happened 40 floors above. Sophia smiled. So, what happens now? Now? Maxwell kissed her forehead. Now, we write our own story. No scripts, no lies, just us being real and true. And there, in the garden high above the city, Sophia realized something important. Real love doesn't need big names or lots of money. It just needs courage, honesty, and the strength to choose what's true, even when it's hard. Her ring wasn't just fancy anymore. It was a promise to always be real. As she watched the sunset with Maxwell, Sophia understood that sometimes lies are just truths waiting for the right moment to shine. Thank you for watching. If you like this story and want to see more, please subscribe to our channel. That way you won't miss any new videos. Give us a thumbs up if you enjoyed it and share what you think in the comments. We love hearing your thoughts. Also, don't forget to check out the other videos on our channel. We'll see you in the next story.